Paradox and ambiguity. We do not seek consensus, recognizing that consensus decisions are often at odds with intelligent decisions. We are responsible for the final decision and we seek input and debate, but then we make the decision and look in the mirror. So, in today's organizations, leaders and managers are dealing with a great deal of uncertainty and ambiguity and must straddle a number of paradoxes. They are obliged to exercise a degree of control, and yet they must encourage their staff to be creative and independent thinkers. On the one hand, they may be very experienced, but on the other hand, their experience may blind them to novel opportunities which emerge in complex environments. Senior teams are often encouraged to change and to innovate, and at the same time, they are expected stand firm for the traditional values and the brand which their organization represents. Paradoxically, they are enjoined to change in order to stay the same. In other words, they have to innovate to sustain organizational continuity. And yet, despite the uncertain environment and contradictory injunction, a lot of talk in organizations and in management literature is highly purposeful and deals in certainties. For example, the ideal for senior teams is that managers and leaders choose the future for their organization. They set the right conditions for their staff to be productive, and they can even change the culture. By implication, senior managers and leaders get to their exalted place in the organization from knowing what they are doing and acting appropriately, decisively, and authoritatively. Of course, this is no different from the dominant assumptions in a whole variety of different professions where there is an equivalence drawn between being professional and uncertainty. In this context, uncertainty, ambiguity, and paradox, profoundly disturbing and potentially paralyzing contradictions, might seem like very abstruse subjects to write about in book about management and organizing. It might seem counterintuitive and unhelpful to deal in the ambiguous when one might, instead of offering prescriptions to managers about how to act, which is the conventional tack to take in a book on organizing. However, the conviction is that ultimately it is more helpful and more realistic to try to find ways of understanding organizational life in all its complexity, its blooming, buzzing confusion, as William James once referred to experience, rather than relying on the thin simplification which constitute the recommendation of much management literature. They are thin simplifications, a phrase one borrows from the political scientist James C. Scott in the year 1999, because they are abstractions from the rich and complex view. It is just as important to treat what it is, no matter how complex and messy, than what we think should be. If it means that we have to reduce our ideas behind or beyond recognition, it is a contention that managers both understand and don't understand what is going on in their organization at the same time, and this is a phenomenon worth thinking about and exploring. First, though, one should deal with the terms using to explain briefly what it means by them. As the book proceeds, we will look at some of those terms and how they manifest in organizational life in more depth. But at this stage of the proceedings, one can understand uncertainty as arising from the interweaving of everyone's intentions. We may start out by forming attentions which are permitted by our world view, which we formalize in plans, but this is also what everyone else is doing at the same time. So, uncertainty arises in social life because we act into a web of other people's actions and intentions. We can no more predict how we will respond when we encounter other people's actions than we can always anticipate what their actions will be. Although we may have strong hunches, we often experience a lot of ambiguity, that is to say, where we are alert to a variety of different meanings of what is going on without there necessarily being a relationship between the meanings. Meanwhile, contradictions, for example, the injunction to stay the same or innovate, may form part of this ambiguity and produce a relationship of negation between two different interpretations. Finally, paradox is a particular form of contradiction where to think one thing is automatically to call out its polar opposite, both at the same time. So, paradox is a particular priority of thinking which can be explored as the book unfolds. When contradictions present themselves in organizational life, there is usually no obvious way to proceed, or perhaps there are a variety of ways which all have their ups and downs. Nonetheless, and in one's experience, most managers and leaders are already coping relatively well with their own environment of uncertainty. They are able to sustain managing and not managing in their various contexts reasonably well. However, experience shows a lack of facility in being able to talk about precisely what they are doing when managers are coping with uncertainty, although they know that organizational life is unpredictable if you ask them directly. Managers seem to have precious book to explore this consciously and publicly. So what one intends to do is to focus a bit more on being in control and not in control on those interstices in organization when it is not always clear what to do and when there are contradictory pressures on managers. If you could dwell with the contradictions for a while and think about what might be going on, this might be just as helpful as producing a generalized piece of advice which bears no relation to the context in which managers are obliged to operate. Leaders and managers play a unique role in organizational change. They act as champions for change, as supporters of employees, and in reinforcing change after it has taken root. Despite the many studies that show the high failure rate of change management initiatives, one study of more than 56 companies found that a key characteristic of successful change efforts was the involvement of managers who are able to act as levers of change at all levels of the organization. Given that leaders are involved in the daily work routines of all employees, it is of the utmost importance that they implement the following change management strategies to increase their chances of success. So, at least 5 strategies that can be applied to see that the chances of success are high. First one is establish a clear vision. So, effective change leadership requires a clear vision that is shared with the employees in a way that is both understandable and inspiring. The shared vision should outline what will change and what will remain the same for the organization, the team, and individuals. Beyond hearing or reading about the vision, employees need to understand it. Therefore, communicating the vision many times and in various mediums will ensure your employees have a clear understanding of the planned change and the reasons behind it. Here are few things you can do as a leader to establish a clear vision. So, create a clear picture of the organizational goals, how the change initiative will help to achieve those goals, and how it will affect employees on an individual level. Regularly discuss the vision in meetings, on the company intranet, and in town hall gatherings. So, talk with your employees individually, formally, and informally about the change, and more specifically about how it is going for them personally. Next, leverage the change management timeline. So, organizational change is a journey that requires a strategy before, during, and after implementation. As a leader, you can take the following steps throughout the timeline. Before the change, begin to ask questions to determine employee readiness for change. Surveys are one way to do this. Set and communicate employee goals that relate directly to the change initiative. During the change, recognize milestones and employee actions in support of change. This is a great way to keep change efforts alive. During meetings, emphasize in items that have been crossed off to do lists and praise the team's progress and continued commitment. After the change, reinforce the goal of the initiative with the help of surveys or questionnaires that assess the degrees to which the transformation has been successful. Use the responses to determine if further action needs to be taken. Next, support your employees. New MRI technology is able to show what happens to our brains when we are faced with major organizational change, giving us a better understanding of the feelings that change can evoke in us, including fear, anxiety, anger, and fatigue. To gain the support and commitment of your employees, try using change management strategies to mitigate emotions like fear and resistance. The following are some actions you can take to support your employees during times of change. Create. When your employees develop the communication, time management, and stress management skills that can help them handle change, they will be better equipped and will feel more confident. During times of change, it may be necessary to provide change management training for both leaders and employees, as well as implement a reinforcement strategy that promotes real-time coaching and ongoing learning. Effective change management requires the active participation of leadership and the implementation of the strategies as mentioned. While the action leaders take to support change initiatives may vary depending on their role, function, or leadership style, the underlying commonality is their commitment to the change initiative and ensuring its success.